Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the One Broke Actress podcast, an honest account of actor life plus a few lessons I learned in the process. I am your host, Sam Valentine, and this episode is for you if you have ever asked me about New York City or ever asked me about live theater. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know anything about those worlds. So I grilled actress Maggie Bera, who is a equity actress on stage in New York City, with all your questions. She recently transitioned to living in New York, so she talks about that move process, how she found stability, what her day-to-day life was like going to open calls versus when she joined the union, dealing with agents in the mix, how open calls affected her casting later on, which I thought was very interesting. She talks about the burnout of it all, how to manage your schedule, the ups and downs of dealing with an industry that requires you to sing, dance, and act, which if you know me, you know I'm a single threat, so I got a lot of questions about that triple threat situation. She answers everything for you guys today, and she also runs her own blog and podcast called Actor Aesthetic. You better be following it on Instagram and all of the other places that you can find her, TikTok, all of the worlds. You guys know there's 10,000 places you can find people these days. She does tons of content for actors about everyday life as a theater actor in New York City. And I think she's going to answer a lot of questions for you guys today and give you the realness of the day-to-day life. So without further ado, please enjoy someone I admire so much for putting herself on the internet as she goes through the ups and downs of this business. Got a special place in my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy Maggie Bera. So, ladies and gentlemen, Maggie Bera, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Yes, we are talking about theater today, which is fun for me because I often talk to people in the world of film and television, and I know kind of what I'm talking about. And theater, I have not dabbled in for roughly 13 years. So, what the heck is the theater life? Tell me, because you listen to the podcast, right? So
Yes.
Do you see through lines for our actors who are listening to this who are like, I might turn this one off. Do you see through lines through our careers in theatrical, as in on stage, and theatrical as in film and television and commercial?
Yes, 100%. That's not even a question. It's just the only difference is that the medium in which we work can be slightly different. Whereas most of us in the New York world are pursuing a theater career, there's also theater out in LA. And likewise, you might be pursuing a career in TV and film out in LA, but there's still theater to be found out there too. So, and auditions out there too. So the more the merrier. And I'm excited to dive in a little bit more into our fun little world we have going on over here.
Yes. And you are specifically in New York City, and
Yes.
you have been back and forth because you were at school in Texas, and then you said you moved in with your parents in New Jersey during the pandemic. And that's when we met on
Yes.
Amy McNabb's podcast. It's great. You guys should listen to it. Actors Encourage. And she talked to both of us in COVID when we were like, what is the world? What's going on? So now you've been in New York for 2 years solid.
Yes, ma'am. 2 years.
This is a lot of people's dreams, right? That's like the Broadway dream, to like go to New York and live. And you just told me you're between shows, which means you've booked shows because you were in Jersey auditioning. And is Jersey okay thing to say, or do I have to say New Jersey?
No, please say Jersey. You don't even need
Okay.
to hit it with a new. We don't need no new around here. We are Jersey through and through.
It feels better. It just feels
just
more
feels
appropriate.
right.
So you're in Jersey auditioning, commuting to New York for things, and then you make the move to New York. A lot of actors who want to make the move to New York City to work in theater. How was the process? It's so fresh for you. So like, what went right? What went wrong? Even having home so close by, was it still scary? Like, what was the ins and outs of actually moving into the city?
It's so funny you just asked me this because I just did recently a podcast on exactly this, because my number one question that I'm getting right now, especially during this time when a lot of folks are either graduating from high school or college and wanting to move to New York. The biggest question is, how do I do it? Like, where do I go? What neighborhood is right for me? How do I start? And to that I say, if you are lucky enough to be nearby, near the area, say maybe you grew up sort of like me. I know a lot of folks are from New Jersey and they move out here to New York. I highly suggest visiting the area before you move. If you cannot do that, my next suggestion is to sublet before you sign a lease, because you want to be really sure that where you're going to be living for the next year or so is good for you. It makes sense for you. The commute makes sense for you. The neighborhood makes sense. You feel safe. You feel like you have a community. And a lot of those things are hard to find, especially in this market right now. There's a lot of people here that are coming back to the city. So because of that, there's going to be more demand for places. When I first moved to New York, I moved to Harlem. But when I was first looking with my friend, I ended up moving to Harlem with two of my friends from college. When I was first looking, we had a set price that we were pretty much done deal. This is how much we were going to spend. And when we started to look in like the Upper West Side, for example, there just wasn't a whole lot out there for us. There weren't a whole lot of options. And for what we were willing to pay, I always say we were going to get a closet without a closet. Like there were tiny, tiny little places with no closets. None.
Only place that makes me feel really good about living in LA.
Yeah.
It's just New York. It's the only
so
one.
Jelly, so jealous, so jealous. So like, we were looking around, and another thing I highly suggest doing is if you do have the option to get out here and actually look around at these neighborhoods, you should be checking them out at different times of the day. You want to be really careful that if you find a good steal in one place, you don't want to be in a place that doesn't feel good to walk around at night. I mean, New York is like any city, okay? You're going to have good places and you're going to have places that you don't feel as comfortable living in. And so you want to be careful and specific. What we found, it was a great place for us. We got a little bit more space, living a little bit more north on Manhattan. However, I actually now live with my sister. We ended up buying our place in Hoboken, right outside the city. So we are literally a bus ride into the city. And I didn't know how easy it was to find a place that was a little bit outside where you can get the best of both worlds. So check out New York, but also check out the surrounding areas. I have friends who live out in Astoria and in Brooklyn. And then, of course, in Jersey, in Hoboken and Jersey City and the like.
That's great. So you found your area. And then, because I know the drill of getting started in LA, what's your next step? Did you already have an income job? Were you already in classes? I'm a single thread. I do one thing really, really well, and it's acting. Adding the singing, adding the dancing, running around a city that has public transportation, which, like, let me tell you about Jelly. That is what I'm jealous of. Where do you start after you get a little planted? Like, you find a lease, and then where do we lead our actors?
Well, it is always great to have something to fall back on here. I think it's so important to have something going for you, whether it's a little bit of a savings or a job that is outside of our industry almost as soon as possible. Because if you do not have the savings or the financial stability, it's going to be really challenging really quickly. That is something that I hope and pray that schools teach their students, because it is just as important to know how to sing, dance, and act if you're going to be doing this in New York as it is to have a footing, have a foundation underneath you that comprises of financial stability. And so for me specifically, it's kind of like I had two starts almost, because before the pandemic, my job was predominantly through myself. I had actor aesthetic. I was coaching. I was doing online coaching and virtual coaching, online coaching and live coaching, students acting, singing, and dancing. And then I was also creating products online. Like I was literally selling what I was learning in the city. My second start, I guess you will, is after the pandemic, when I came back to all of this and I moved to Hoboken with my sister, I was beginning to dabble more in 9-to-5 work, full-time work, so that I could have more comfortability. I could have more of a foundation underneath me. I could pay for our mortgage. And so where I was at the beginning of 2022, I was working a job in marketing with a theatrical company. And then I moved out to where I am now in Hoboken, and I'm now working in marketing for a real estate company based in Hoboken. How to find these jobs is like all over the place, right? You got to be really, really strategic with it. I ended up getting my first position in marketing because I was doing some copywriting online, but they knew me through Actor Aesthetic. They knew of my work online. And so, if you're able to promote your services, promote what you do, and be really strategic with that, you can find your way. It just takes time, and it takes knowing people and putting yourself out there.
Okay, you're hitting on some of my absolute favorite things, which is developing your groundwork first. And that is so much of my favorite things. What would you say to someone who heard that and thought, well, I can't get a job in marketing because then how do I audition? Because that is what we're told, that like the audition is going to be the rat race. You're going to be running from, especially in New York, you guys do open calls, which I want to discuss.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of verbiage do you use to tell a boss, hey, I am going to be an actor with a gently unsteady schedule in a city like New York, where acting isn't the number one. Like in LA, when someone moves here and says they're an actor, it's like, oh yeah, you're an actor. But New York, people could do a lot of different things there. So what kind of discussions did you have with your hiring people?
Wow, that's such a good question. It is a really difficult conversation to have because you want to be as straightforward as possible and you don't want to lie if this is what you want. And listen, I knew when I was in college that I wanted to be where I'm at right now and to have a financially stable job in addition to performing. And so when I approached this interview with the job that I'm at now, I was very straightforward with the hiring manager and saying, this is what I have to offer, and I would love to contribute to your company in any way. However, you just need to know that there's this other side of me that I'm also able to continue pursuing theater. I'm going to make it work. I've made it work for the past several years. And, you know, at the time, like I was able to back it up by saying, I did this X, Y, and Z. I did this show in addition to my work online, and I was able to maneuver my hours around, you know, stuff like that. Because I think it's really hard to hear me talk right now and say, like, anyone can do that. It's really hard. Okay. It's not like sunshine and roses, but you have to have the mindset of, I can be more flexible than a 9 to 5. I can achieve the work that I need to achieve outside of this. But there are other ways to achieving this lifestyle. You know, you can work a part-time job. You can work more of a full-time job that has flexible hours. It is all, you're able to do all of those things as long as you are really strategic with your time and your energy, because it can drain you if you're too far in one world or the other.
Yeah. So talk me through what that looks like. Like, talk me through an open call type of day, because this question would have been very different 3 or 4 years ago. So now that we're back in some sort of consistency, what does the New York theater life look like on just a random day for you?
Yeah, good question. So I'm a member of Equity, and I have been a little bit since before the pandemic. Yeah.
We love a union.
Oh, heck yeah. Oh, heck yeah. So I had been a member of SAG for years and years, but I joined the union a little bit after I graduated because I had gotten a job in theater and I was able to earn my equity card that way. It's a little bit different now. You can join. There are different, various ways to join. And if you want more information on that, just check out actorsequity.org. They have information on their open access program and all that. But because I am a member, the reason why I bring this up is because my take on auditions is going to be different than someone who is a non-union actor. Pros and cons to it, because these open calls, I can attend these open calls that are equity auditions, like equity principal auditions and equity chorus calls, which exist in other cities as well, but predominantly in New York. I can attend these calls and have a time slot, or if I don't have a time slot, I can show up in the morning and hope to be seen at some point. But it's not as difficult as it would be if I was, and when I used to be, non-equity. So I'm not so much at these open calls anymore as I used to be, because I'm able to snag a time slot. And the other, of course, I have agents who are able to send me out on an audition and whatnot, and self-tapes are an option too. So this is why I say that my job is a little bit easier for me, because I'm able to time out my days a little bit better than I was able to if I were, if I was 21, 22, and I was non-equity.
So walk me through these differences first. Non-equity, not having representation. You just can show up and get seen. Like, I've heard this, but I just need more information, because I live in a town where if you don't got a time, you ain't gonna get seen, period, end of question, and attending in a tape. Yeah. So non-equity, start me with there for our actors who are newer, and then we'll work into the process.
Yes. So non-equity, if you are a non-equity actor, you're not a member of, and when I say non-equity, I mean you are not a member of Actors Equity Association. When I talk about EPAs and ECCs, these are auditions that are required by the union. A little bit different than if you were a member of SAG. Those don't really exist like they do with Actors Equity. With Actors Equity, you have these auditions where, say, a theater has contracts that are a part of the union. They employ actors from the union. there are certain types of contracts that require these theaters, regional theaters, Broadway, national tours, they require them to hold these almost like open calls for actors. They're supposed to see X amount of actors throughout the day. They have all of these specific rules about what times they're allowed to see the actors, when they're supposed to show up. And if you are a non-equity actor, you don't have the access necessarily to the portal, the equity portal, to sign up for these auditions a week before, but you can certainly chance it by showing up to the audition the day and see whether or not the creative team has time and chooses to see non-equity actors after they've seen all of the equity actors.
Okay. Do you know what to prepare for these auditions in advance?
Yeah, so every audition is going to post, if you don't have access to actorsequity.org, like the portal, because you're not a member, you can go to these websites like Backstage and Playbill and Broadway World, and they'll typically list the auditions and exactly where they are, what time they are, and what the creative team is asking of you. In these auditions, different from an audition for a film or TV piece, they will ask you to bring in something of your own. They'll say, bring in a 16-bar piece, a 32-bar song of whatever style that they're looking for. If it's a dance audition, they'll say, just bring your tap shoes or bring your jazz sneakers, whatever, and we'll teach you a combination in the room. But you'll have a good understanding of what they're looking for. They won't, I would say about 90% of the time, they don't give you material beforehand for these types of auditions. They ask you to bring in something yourself. Yeah.
Okay, so you show up to these section time, like it just like
It's
blows
so
my
weird.
mind that this exists. It's so weird. So you just show up and you wait at a designated time of day to see if people will see you. Like, what's the life balance? Give me more info when you were going through this.
Oh my gosh. It's like, I can take you back to when I was, when I just got out of school and I was going to these auditions. And I mean, I would sit there. So most of these auditions, right, if they're equity principal auditions, they'll be happening all day. They start from typically 9 or 9:30 to 5 or 5:30. And actors are seen in 20-minute increments. So you have certain people that will sign up online starting a week before. You'll have others that'll try to sign up on the list the day of, the morning of, and then they'll try to filter in people throughout these 20-minute increments. However, if you are a non-equity actor, you could potentially, if they have time, they'll see you. You could potentially be waiting until 4:15, 4:30, 4:45 to hopefully be seen. It's like nuts. And it has gotten crazier because there seems to be so many actors out here now who are auditioning, and they will sign up on these unofficial lists the morning of at like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning in front of a studio and post it on the studio doors saying, okay, I'm number 1, number 2, number 3. It's just crazy, and it's gotten so saturated. But yeah, that's the life. I mean, you could be sitting there all day and maybe not even be seen.
Wow. What's the mindset that you had to keep through that period?
Good question. So when I was doing this, I didn't have a whole lot of responsibility. I was still living with my parents. And so I was very, very lucky there. I can't say that I
appreciate the acknowledgement of that privilege. I really do.
I couldn't do it now. I don't think I could do it now. I don't think I just wouldn't have the time because I'd be working. When you start to have these responsibilities pile up, you have things you have to pay for. You have people you have to look after. I mean, it's just a whole nother world. Say you just graduate, your biggest priority right now is paying rent. When you sit these 6, 7, 8-hour days waiting to get seen, what I used to tell myself was like, every opportunity to get seen meant it was one more thing I could check off my list. If I was waiting in line and I didn't get seen, well, for the rest of the time that I was there, I was doing something else, right? It wasn't all about getting seen at this audition. I was also pouring a lot of myself into actor aesthetic. I was writing blog posts and like brainstorming content ideas and things that were keeping me afloat so that if the opportunity came that I got to get seen, it was awesome. It was great. And I could write it down in my audition journal. And it was another chance to just get in front of a casting director that didn't quite know me yet. That was my main goal. Like I wasn't out there to book a Broadway show. I was out there to have someone from Telsey or Tara Rubin's office, casting directors in the city, to just see me for the first time since I had graduated college. I mean, no no one knew me at the time, and why would they? So that was my mindset. And some days were great and some days were really hard.
Do you have relationships that you made in that time period, casting that you met in that time period, that has built on itself in the following years?
Yeah, I did. And that's why, if you have the time and you are strategic with your time, you have to try these auditions out. If they don't work, they don't work, and you can find other ways to get your foot in the door. But, you're not paying to get seen at these auditions. It's not like a pay to play where you have to, pay to take a class with a casting director. It is a free way to get your foot in the door. And over time, I would look at my audition journal and say, like, wow, I went to this equity audition and this equity audition. And then 2 days later, I got called in through my agents or directly to me from that agent. And I was like, for sure, they saw something in the room, because there's no way, with the amount of people in the city, they would have just picked my headshot out of a pile, because there were so many other people that had already been doing it for some time. That's why it's just so important to get yourself actually physically in the room with these folks. And it's just so different than film and TV. There is no such thing as walking into a room of producers uninvited, doing a monologue or doing sides from the show. It's just unheard of. So it's a completely different world.
No, can you imagine?
No.
Can you imagine if they were like, all right, Stranger Things, open door, who wants to come read? It would be insane.
Open door, you'd have lines. I mean, there are already crazy lines here, but no, you'd have just people showing up that don't act at all. That would just be there just for the fun. I mean, it would just be crazy. It would be crazy.
But that doesn't happen for these calls?
It does. It does. And especially if there's a show that's more, if there's a more popular show, maybe a show that just opened, that everyone's wanting to get seen for.
Yeah, when Harry Potter was announced that they were doing the musical, The Cursed Child, that a bunch of fan people didn't show up to just give it a go. They must
they just gave it a go. There are people all the time I see coming up the street. What are you doing here? And they're just like, I saw this audition. Okay, for example, Stranger Things actually has a show that's coming to Broadway, whatever. Everyone knows the show now. So I'm sure there are plenty of people there that were just there for the hell of it. And I don't know, but it's just a weird world that we live in over here, because it just doesn't happen in these other industries.
Yeah. How do you transition from running the gauntlet, going back and forth, working on everything for your online blog, which we haven't even talked about yet, and getting all of those day-to-day things done, taken care of, even when you do have the privilege of living at home? How do you move that into becoming equity?
Okay, so I became equity because I booked a show. But the way that I got there was I was going to those equity auditions. I was going to straight open calls, which were just auditions that weren't run by the union. They were just open call auditions for anyone and anyone. And I was really getting very burnt out. I saw something that I was like, geez, I have to go to this. If I don't go to this, I'd be so disappointed. And I ended up going, and I ended up booking the show, and I'm really grateful. The way that I did that was I, again, kept thinking, if I don't give myself the opportunity to put myself in front of a new casting director one more time, then, what am I doing? Why am I out here hustling? I have to do this. This is why I went to school. This is what I wanted to do my entire life. I have to give myself that opportunity. But the way that you become equity, right? So back then, like I was saying, there were only a few ways that you could become equity. Similar to SAG, where you'd have to work a certain amount of jobs to qualify you for the union, a certain amount of contracts. That is pretty much done away. So after the pandemic, they started something called open access, where I'm paraphrasing, but to give you the basics of it, you can join the union as long as you can prove that you have worked and been paid for professional theater gig in any capacity. It's not that you have to book a show that gives you a contract, or you have to work 50 weeks at an equity theater. None of that anymore, which is great because it's built the union up. We have more folks that have joined the union. It's gotten stronger. It's just completely different. So now if you can prove that, you can join. And my biggest thing that I have to say about that is folks ask me a lot, how do I know when I'm ready to join the union? Should I just join after I graduate college? What do? I always tell them that you just have to, it's going to be different for everyone. Every teacher is going to tell you something different, but you will know. You don't need to join as soon as you graduate. You can go to these auditions and see, what does it feel like to wait these long hours? Is it worth it? Do I want to be able to still do a non-equity tour? There's a lot of them out there right now. Do I still want that possibility to work that show? Or am I looking for a little bit more stability? Do I want to be able to qualify for health insurance through the union? Do I want a little bit of a higher pay wage? Do I want those protections behind me? You'll know in your heart whether or not you're ready. And because I had been aware of how unions worked a little bit, I was a member of SAG since I was like 14 or 15. I did a couple of commercials. My sister was a member of Equity. Yeah, of course. My sister was an Equity member when she was like really little, like 9 or 10 years old. She did a tour. And that was my first understanding of like the union. And I knew from seeing her do an Equity tour, I could see how protected they were. And I knew that's what I wanted for myself. But it just depends.
Yeah. So you booked a show and you were like, it's time. I'm going to do it now.
Exactly. And if I had booked non-union work, maybe I would have done it. But I booked that show. And in that moment, I was like, listen, I think this is it. I think I need to join. I spoke with the producer about it. It wasn't even that they didn't necessarily give me an Equity contract at the time. It was just a job offer. And I said, I would love to join the union with this offer. And I negotiated. They gave me my union card. And that's how we did it.
So you negotiated that, not your agent?
No, actually they didn't, because when I first graduated, we did a senior showcase at the end of my time. We did it for agents, and I ended up freelancing with an agent. I wasn't even signed with them. Now I am signed with a separate agency, but at the time I was freelancing with them.
Freelancing with agents, like it is a whole nother world. We're going to talk about that.
I forget that it's so different. But yeah, I was freelancing, and like I still got fantastic auditions from them, and they still negotiated my contracts for me later. But at the time, I mean, I didn't have a whole lot of auditions just yet through them. And I went to an open call. Like I wasn't signed. I wasn't like, there were no strings yet. So yeah.
When you're freelancing with an agent, it essentially means, correct me if I'm wrong, that you can have other agents as well, and they're not signed to you as a contract?
I don't know for sure. What I can say from my experience was I was freelancing, meaning I had no contract signed with them. Does that mean you can freelance with other agencies? Maybe, but you certainly can't freelance with one and be signed to another, because I'm almost positive that the people that you're signed with will not want to share you, and they'll make sure that there's probably something in their contract that says otherwise. But if you are freelancing with someone, right, there's no strings attached, there's no contract signed, it's just more of an agreement, a verbal agreement. So I had booked shows that were not through them. I wasn't obliged to pay. But then later in my time with them, if I had booked a show that was outside of their jurisdiction, they didn't get me the audition, I would have paid them. But later, I did book shows that were through them, and I certainly did pay them. But yeah, there's no rules there, which is kind of scary and weird.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to reel it back in because I'm just like mentally clocking the differences. You guys also call Theatrical legit agents. Yeah. And then Theatrical means theater.
Yes. From my understanding, we'll call like legit agents folks who are predominantly in the theater and film world. Theater, film, TV, whereas we have separately commercial agents, or folks who are representing you commercially. So typically, like our agents, like even when I was growing up and I had completely separate agents that I was signed with, we had one division that was our agent handled us on the film, TV, and theater division. And then we had one separate one for commercial. And it's kind of like that now with the agents that I'm signed with.
Okay, that makes sense. LA is the same on that one. So you've made the transition. We're living the life. You're getting auditions. You have an agent. You are Equity. You are working and also have money. You are right now between shows. What's the lifestyle and time balance that makes this work? Because whether you are inside of New York or right on the outskirts, it is a damn expensive place to live.
Yes, it is.
What's your lifestyle and what's your mental time energy? Because you mentioned burnout before, so I want to talk about this.
Yeah. For me personally, since moving here, right, I've had to hustle a lot. And with working this job, I've had different periods of my life already in these 2 years. So when I moved here, I was doing a show in New York while I was doing my, at the time, full-time job that was totally remote. So I was rehearsing during the day, and also doing my work while I was literally like during breaks. And then at night, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Oh my God.
And then once I started working my full-time job in person, there have been periods of time where I'll be going to work in the morning, stepping out and taking a bus to New York and doing an audition if I get an appointment, which has happened a lot recently, and then go back to the office. There's been a few times since I've started this job where I've had to, if I do a show, for example, last year I was in a show and I had to sort of like cut my time down with my job to part-time. I was able to keep my insurance, able to keep that steady flow. It just wasn't as much because I was also doing the other show out in New York. So there have been like weird like periods of time where I'm doing one thing and doing the other. Right now, because I have a show coming up, but it's not quite, time yet. It's a couple months out. I'm still going on auditions because there are things that are happening before and after that. But otherwise, I'm working and I'm working a lot. And then once I'm done with my days at the office, I come home. Lovely. I get to walk home. My office is 15-minute walk away from me. That's my time to do what makes me feel good. I mean, I've been getting more back into the gym recently. It's like really important, especially if you're sitting at a desk job for a long time. You want to make sure you're staying active because when you do get thrown into a show, it's tough to maintain that stamina. And then also when I'm not working on, my podcast or actor aesthetic and things like that, just finding time to see shows and go to baseball games with my boyfriend and, like have fun, do things that don't have anything to do with performing for myself, like rediscovering my love for theater by going to a Broadway show or going for a walk with my friends, going for a walk with my sister and like whatever. Just if I don't do that, I go absolutely insane. So it's tough to find that time, but you have to, because if you don't, you again, burn out. It's not sustainable.
Acting on film and television is one thing because it's a lot of self-tape. It's a lot of like this medium. But when you are a singer, dancer, actor, the requirements of your movement abilities, of your breath abilities, there's just so much that is asked of your body in so many ways. So do you have like a sleep schedule? Do you have like a movement schedule, especially when you have a show coming up? So when rehearsals start for that and you're going to be up or performing in the evening, what are some things you do to keep yourself steady in all of these areas?
Yeah. So I mentioned the gym earlier, and I'm not so much of like a routine gym person. I'm not going there necessarily to hit, machines and stuff like that. What I do and what really feels good for me is stuff to get my cardio up, stuff to get my stamina up. So and stuff to get my heart rate up, because like I said, I'm sitting a lot throughout the day. And this was especially hard last year when I was doing a very physically active show. I had to make sure going into it that I was active and that I was staying healthy and that I wasn't going to injure myself vocally or physically. Thank God I was able to get through that without any harm. But it is really important that whether or not you have a show coming up, that you find a routine that fits for you. So I love to go after work. I'm not a before work girly because I know that I'm going to have a long day. So if I'm able to go after work, I love going to the gym, hitting the treadmill, going on the elliptical. And my favorite thing to do is if I have an audition coming up, I love going through stuff when I'm on the treadmill or when I'm running because I'm working my body, and also it's like I can feel the adrenaline that you would feel if you're going into an audition. So, you get your heart rate up, you get your body temperature up the same way you would when you're walking into an audition. So I love working on material that way. But it also you feel so much better after you have a stressful day going to the gym.
Yeah. Is that your only thing, or are there things you regulate in your schedule to keep it?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about like sleep and like things like that.
Sleep for sure. Sleep is a good one. I mean, like, I know that if I'm not going to get 8 hours of sleep, and it's so dead on, if I don't get at least 8 hours of sleep, I am not going to have the mental capacity to do what I need to do throughout the day, because I'm trying to hit a lot of things throughout the day. I'm not going to show up for work in a good place, and I'm certainly not going to step foot in an audition room in a good mindset. So I know that I have to get myself to bed at least by 12 o'clock, or I'm going to walk into those rooms in not my best place.
Yeah. Oh my God, 12 o'clock. The grandma in me was just like, midnight.
Oh my God, like, please, if I go to bed every night at 9, that'd be great. But I'm like, I get home at 5 and I'm like, damn, where did the time go? I have so many things I still want to do.
But you know what? It makes sense though, because you're doing theater, which is always performed at night. Before we started recording, you and I were talking, and I was like, I just can't. I don't know if I could get back into the lifestyle, because I'm telling you, Maggie, I go to bed at 9 o'clock, like at night. I really do. We start getting ready for bed at 8:30 around here. And my husband gets up at 5 a.m. most days to go train his clients. And so I get up around then too. And it's like, the theater lifestyle, I just don't know how I do it. Maybe I'm too old.
I mean, you have to be a night owl, right? Like, you think of these shows like, I mean, dream of mine is to be in a Broadway show. But even when I was doing shows in New York off Broadway, right? Like, it's all the same. You go to your job starts, God forbid you're doing a matinee, right? It's during the afternoon, but your job typically is starting at 7 o'clock. Yeah, I know, right? You're starting at, like, your show's at 7, your show's at 8 o'clock at night, every night. You're a night owl, because by the time you get home, it's late. Depending on where you live, it's going to be late. And then it's a different lifestyle. You wake up later, and you spend your time differently, completely opposite from how your typical 9-to-5 person would work, because that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Are there sacrifices you've had to make in terms of relationships and things like that to deal with the type of schedule and requirements of this job?
Yes and no. I think that sacrifice is strong, because I have such a love-hate relationship with the idea of having to sacrifice for your career, because I do think that there are ways around sacrifice, yet at the same time, there have been things that I haven't been able to go to because I'm in a show, or major life things that I haven't been able to see because I'm in a show, or I have an audition. For example, like, there are certain times in my life where there have been, and I think I'm getting to a place where I'm a little bit more comfortable with taking these leaps of, like, going on vacation. I used to say, oh, I can't, schedule a vacation because I don't know if I'm going to have a show. Well, you're never going to know if you're going to have a show. And what's different about the theater world is, like, you could potentially have a show for the next year, every day for the next year, or you could be in a show for a week, or you could be in a regional theater tomorrow. Someone could call you up. Like, it's very quick. And I know that film and TV is also very quick. These, like, periods of time where all of a sudden you could be doing a 6-month contract and you don't know about it until next week. Those things can happen, but we can't wait for them to happen. We kind of, like, we need to live our lives. So at the beginning of my career after graduating, I always was like, no, I can't do that. That's the time where we're going to be having a lot of auditions, so I can't do that. Well, BS. Like, I took a vacation with my family a couple weeks ago, and it was amazing. And I stressed right up until it, being like, oh no, I'm going to book this show. I'm really close to this show and I can't go. It all worked out. And sometimes you're going to have to move things around and get strategic with it. That's my big word of the night for some reason, strategic.
I like it.
I think when it comes to relationships, I think it is important that the people who are close to you, your family, and people who are very important to you, you just have to make the time. Our lives are weird and different, and stuff will happen. We'll book a show that always happens at night, and unfortunately, we won't be able to do some things because we're going to be doing the show. But there are other ways to get around that, and as long as you make the time for the people that matter, like, at the end of the day, there are so many of us in this industry, and you can feel very replaceable. So what matters most are your family and the people who you care about. Those are the people that are going to care about you when you are gone.
Deep thoughts for a Monday,
Whatever,
Maggie.
it's fine.
Yeah.
It's, I wrote that down. I'm kidding.
It's fine. It's recorded.
So
we got it on video.
It's fine.
I want to ask you more about actor aesthetic, because you and I come from the same world of being like, this business is weird. Let's talk about it online. Why did you start what you started, and, like, what was the impetus?
Okay, so long story short, when I was in college, I had to take a couple of credits at the end of my time there to qualify as a full-time student, because I came into school with a lot of AP classes. So my gen eds were almost covered, like, very much covered. We had really awesome scholarships. We had in-state tuition for out-of-state kids. I mean, Texas State was awesome. And our scholarship was only granted to us if we were considered a full-time student. So I had to cover some of that, like, extra credits. and I took some classes in media, the history of mass media. One of those classes asked me to create a blog, and I was like, what the hell? Like, I didn't know what to write about. It was like the best part about this was it was during like the 2016 election time.
Yes.
And so, and I was in Texas, which was terrible. And like, had so much to say, didn't know who to say it to, but I was like, oh, maybe I should do a blog like on politics. Bad decision, bad decision, bad decision. So glad I didn't do that. So glad I didn't do that. That world got real nasty, like, yeah, real quick. So instead, to be safe and to do something that I was a little bit more comfortable with, I created Actor Aesthetic. The name, I don't know why. Someone like in my class said the word aesthetic all the time, and I thought it was like the coolest word. And I love the alliteration. So my dad still doesn't know. He's like, I don't even know how to spell aesthetic. Like, what a stupid name. And I'm like, Dad, stop. I don't either. Okay, but it's all fine.
It's a great name. It is so good.
Thank you.
I love
Thank
it.
you. Thank you so much. So yeah, whatever. That was the name. That's where the name came from. And I started just really writing about what I knew because it was easy to me. And once I graduated, I was like, damn, I want to keep this. Like, why not? Let's keep this going. I started blogging about my experiences, blogging about things I didn't know about in school. There's this huge gap between college training programs and the real world. And it's at no fault to the training program. Because especially if you're not in like LA, if you're not going to school in LA or New York, you're just a little bit removed from what we go through, right? And so unless you're having teachers, which we did have teachers or casting directors come in from the industry and tell us how it is in the real world, it's like impossible to know what's up. And I knew of equity, but I didn't know like what these auditions meant, or I learned a lot by doing. And I wrote it all down. I wrote it all down. I started a podcast. I talked with folks who were going through the same thing. And I found a community because there were a lot of the same people like me who were totally clueless about the logistics of this weird as hell world, especially New York. And there are amazing programs in the country that teach you how to sing and dance and act. And there are some that are now hopping on the train and teaching you a little bit more about the business of acting and how to advocate for yourself, contracts, all that stuff. But I was like, damn, like someone's got to talk about it. So I'll say something. And so that's kind of how that started.
Yes. And what is the status of it these days? Like, what do you refer to the platform as? How much do you get to work on it? And are you ever concerned that you live your life on the internet? Hi.
Oh, yeah.
Asking for a friend.
Love to hear it. Love to see it. I mean, like, I think there was a time where I was only posting on Actor Aesthetic. Like, I didn't really feel like I had an online presence for myself until after the pandemic, because I started to find myself again after I created Actor Aesthetic. Like, I was pouring so much into it. I'm very happy that I'm able to separate the two, where I can live my life, my personal life, and show as much or as little as I want on my personal page, and then treat Actor Aesthetic as more of a business, which is what it is now. I mean, Actor Aesthetic is basically an online platform, an online learning community, and it's a blog and it's a podcast, and it's just designed to educate actors pursuing a career specifically in the theater industry. So when I hop on to Actor Aesthetic, I'm giving them the lowdown of like what it is that I deal with on a daily basis. When I'm going on to my personal account, I'm not always singing and dancing, and I love that I can have the two. But I think what's really important, especially since you have apps like TikTok now that feel very personal, that you can show or feel more comfortable to show more of your life on there. I think it's just important to use them for what they are, use these platforms for what they are. If you're comfortable sharing yourself and sharing your day-to-day life on there, awesome. But I'm not someone necessarily who is super comfortable every day getting on my phone and recording my entire day. But some people are, and I love to follow them. I think it's just a personal preference.
Yeah. Were there things you learned about yourself that made you better in this industry through sharing your journey out loud?
Yes. I think it just taught me to work towards being a smarter actor. Like, I received a lot of questions, especially because I started Actor Aesthetic so young. I received a lot of questions that I didn't know the answers to. Because I was documenting my life, I didn't want to necessarily show myself as the person who knew it all. I wanted to show myself as someone who's just doing it like you, right? Like just learning it
Yeah.
like you. And I did a lot of research. Like I learned a lot through questions that other people had for me. Learned a lot about the union. I learned a lot about the rules behind these auditions. I didn't even know the difference between an agent and a manager until I did some research because someone asked me.
Yeah.
So I definitely worked towards being a smarter actor because I had to, and because I wanted to do justice to these questions because they're great questions. And I think there's space for everyone in this industry. And I just want everyone to be able to advocate for themselves in the best way possible and to be able to walk into an audition room and not feel scared about what's going to happen. Like, I want them to be able to prep their material and have an idea of the next steps. I want them to be able to negotiate a contract. You know, I think, again, going back to the topic of college programs, they can only teach you so much, and a lot is learned by doing. And if I can just lend a hand in any way and ease the anxieties of walking into an EPA or joining the union, then I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, appreciate it because, as you can tell, I know nothing about this world. And I'm so excited for people to hear from someone who's educated in it. And also, I love that you are willing to say, I don't know, I'm figuring it
Oh my
out.
God.
Because we live in a world of, of when we put people up on these platforms of, oh, they've booked multiple shows in New York City. Oh, they're on film and television. Oh, they must know everything. No, you guys, I promise you. Look at me and Maggie right now. Listen to these words. We have no idea what the fuck we're doing.
That's so real. And people will still ask me questions about the union. And I'm like, damn, I wish I knew. And I've been a member for so long and I don't know anything. Like, another point to that is that so much of our industry is changing and continues to change. And stuff that I wrote about 5 years ago is totally extinct now because rules have changed. It feels like they're changing faster than ever because technology, because of good things that are happening in our industry and whatever, but you know, no one knows it all.
That's the realness too of being on the internet and sharing your stuff, is that things I wrote about 5 years ago might not be relevant anymore. And sometimes I have people come to me and say, hey, in this podcast from 2017, I'm like, don't listen to that podcast and assume that it is accurate information. That all being said, as we do figure out our lives out loud and share them with the internet, and as you are between shows and you're about to enter your next show, Maggie, where do you want to direct people to for Actor Aesthetic, for your acting career? Where can people find you, talk to you, all the things?
Great. So you can go to actoraesthetic.com. Follow me on Instagram at Actor Aesthetic if you're looking for more lifestyle tips for the everyday actor in New York. And if you want to follow my shenanigans, you can go to Maggie Bera or MaggieBera.com or really anywhere on Instagram, TikTok, the like, you'll find me. I'll be there. Maggie Bera with 1 R.
We'll link them below. We'll make everyone's life easier.
Yeah, love it.
Maggie, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam. You're welcome.